Okay, good day. My name is Mark Butcher. I'm the Managing Director and one of the guides at Imvelo Safari Lodges in Zimbabwe. I'm an ex-National Parks game ranger, and I've been working in and around Hwange National Park for just over 40 years now. One of the things that's always interesting to talk about, that's very close to my soul, is about the human-wildlife conflict. Okay, it's a commonly used cliche in conservation and ecotourism today, but whether or not how we can turn this human-wildlife conflict into perhaps can it be an opportunity. And I really believe that the story behind Imvelo Safari Lodges is a success story about doing just that. Okay, for those of you not familiar with the geography, Zimbabwe, country in South Central Africa, bordering Botswana to the west, South Africa to the south. And specifically our story is about the northwest of Zimbabwe, the Victoria Falls area, and Hwange National Park. Hwange is very, very close to my soul. 5,000 square miles, 50,000 elephants, one of Africa's great forgotten parks. I've been heavily involved in the conservation of it for many years now. Okay, but what's even more interesting about this whole story is that this is really the heartland of what I believe is the heartland of the Kavango-Zambezi Trans-Frontier Conservation Area. Now that's a mouthful, but what's exciting about it is the biggest protected conservation area on the planet today. Okay, it's a huge tract of land spanning a big portion of not only Zimbabwe, Botswana, Zambia, and Namibia, but even now also southern and southeastern Angola. Okay, and within the boundaries, what is the CASA, TFCA, are 250,000 elephants. Okay, and this is more than 50% of the total population of elephants on the planet, plus huge populations of a lot of endangered predators, such as wild dogs, cheetahs, lions, even animals like giraffe, sable, and roan. It's just a very, very exciting and visionary concept in Pan-African conservation. And Hwange is one of the birthplaces of what today is now known as the Kavango-Zambezi Trans-Frontier Conservation Area. Okay, at Imvelo Safari Lodges, what we've tried to do is we've built up a circuit of lodges in northwestern Zimbabwe, in the heartland of what I call CASA, of what's called CASA. And we've tried to make all these very, very different activities for our international guests at all of our lodges that are in different places, both around Victoria Falls and around Hwange National Park. But what we've done and what we've done differently is how we link communities and conservation. And a lot of this is because, quite simply, we have put lodges not nearby community lands, but actually on community lands. Our story really starts with Gorge's Lodge. And Gorge's Lodge really started when, as a young ranger, I remember visiting Victoria Falls on weekends off and used to see tourists traveling between Victoria Falls Airport and the hotels in town, mostly owned by multinationals, throwing candy out of the windows of their buses at kids on the side of the road. These are the kids that are living in this communal land, this community land around Victoria Falls. And the horrible images and the gut-wrenching horror of that scenario used to really tear me up. And one of the things we decided to do was we said, okay, we have to get the tourism out of town. We've got to get tourism out of Victoria Falls. We've got to get it out of the parks and start putting tourism on community land. And this was the birth of Gorge's Lodge. We built it back in the early 1990s. And not only has it got spectacular views and provide a wonderful experience for our guests, but in the background of that picture, you can see the white buildings off over there. Those are our landlords. Those are the communities and the people in those communities who we've been paying rentals and concession fees to for the past 30 years. And it really is a very successful, true ecotourism product. When we started it, it was one of the first on community land. And even today, it's still one of the biggest actually on community land. Very different paradigm from building on government land or on private land. And of course, this is a picture back from when the birth of Imvelo Safari Lodges, which is around 2011. This is one of our photographers that we first brought in and visiting the local schools and showing these kids some of the things that can go on and some of the fun that can be had by actually interacting with tourists and learning about them and talking with them, as opposed to having them throwing candy at you. And that was how a lot of what we do today started. Okay, part of our story is also about Bomani. And Bomani was a camp that we built outside of Hwange National Park, but right on the very, very boundary of the communal lands. And to me, this was a stepping stone to what grew later. And Bomani is a wonderful camp still today. Guests come from all over the world and can enjoy the wildlife. And there's Queenie and some of her cheetah walking through the lodge one day. But really, and most importantly, it was the birth of what became and is today Thorn Lodge. Thorn Lodge we built on community land, just like Gorges. And when we first spoke to the communities there back in the 1990s, they were very reticent about giving land, setting land aside for tourism. And today we built this wonderful lodge we're very proud of. The chief at the time, Chief Marapula, stressed us that he didn't want a tented camp. What he wanted actually was for us to build a permanent lodge that would be there for our children's children. And of course today our guests have a wonderful time. They can visit Hwange National Park nearby there, have bush lunches. Here's a great image I love of the elephants trundling past on their way to a waterhole while these excited tourists are taking photos of them. Bush lunches next to the waterhole. And that's one of my great friends there, Ephraim, at the back there. He's serving lunch. He's a retired ex-poacher who no longer plies his trade, but he works for us and keeps guests happy, and they have a great time. Great Zimbabwean. And there's one of my favorite lionesses, Imvelo. She's one of the matriarchs of the Ngamo pride, easily recognizable by those cauliflower ears. And that's one of her cubs that she gave birth to in 2018, who's grown up now to be a young boy. And that's one of the young boys in the foreground there. You can see Imvelo on the back left with her cauliflower ears. And there's some more of her cubs there from 2019. Large, big, stable lion pride that lives on the Ngamo plains. One of my other favorites that live on the Ngamo plains around Bomani and Thorn is this female cheetah. We call her Queenie. We always call her Queen of the Plains, but we call her Queenie for short. And that year, a couple of years back, she had 5 cubs in her litter. What is very cool was out of those 5 cubs, and this is a testament to Queenie and her skills as a super mom cheetah, she raised 4 of them. And in that picture, Queenie's on the top left. The 3 of her sons are there, and then her daughter, the only daughter in the litter, is a cheetah that later became known as Cindy. That's her lower down on the tree, sitting on her bum. What happened after those cheetah dispersed as young teenagers, and in inverted commas, they dispersed as Queenie, the female, must have gone into the communal lands, and she got into trouble there. You can see she came back from a sojourn carrying a wire snare around her neck. And I'm not sure if that was a snare. It's probably set to catch a duiker or something around somebody's fields, but Queenie got caught in it. She managed to break free and came home with that. We spent quite a bit of time relocating her. When we did relocate her after first seeing that snare around her neck, we called in some guys and they darted her. And here's Paul de Montiel stuck a dart into her, tranquilized her. And here we managed to get the snare off of the cheetah that later became known as Cindy. Okay, and that young female survived the event. And she actually flourished too. And this was a picture I took last year in 2019, in the early part of the year, green season. And there, Cindy is with her first litter of cubs, four young cheetah, and they're getting stuck into a young impala that Cindy had caught for them. And that picture I love as well. It was taken a few months later. Unfortunately, Cindy had lost a couple of her youngsters, but there's one of her boy cubs with her there, and he's learning his trade from her while she's hunting on the Ngamo plains. And that there is those 3 young cheetah that are now growing up. And that's a picture I just took just a short time ago, a couple of weeks ago. And they now have dispersed from their mom. And they're out hunting on the Ngamo plains. And I'll come back to the story of these 3 young male cheetah, because they're part of the story we're going to tell today. But a lot of the story that I've been telling you around tourism and all the wonderful animals that live in paradise and all the tourists that come to visit us in paradise in Hwange National Park and around Victoria Falls is only part of the story. And this is a Google Earth snapshot of the Hwange National Park boundary around Ngamo. And on the left side of your screen there, you can see what is Hwange National Park, and then the boundary of the park. You can see the double trace line, the fire guard, that separates the park from the community land. And the community land is on the right. And that checkerboard of squares, each one of those squares is a field belonging to a subsistence farmer. So you can see living around the boundaries of the park, there clearly are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of families of people. And these are the people that were disenfranchised by the colonial government from the benefits of living next door to Hwange National Park. But all these people live next door to paradise. I spoke earlier and I told you that subsistence farmers, so when you're a subsistence farmer, that means you have to grow all your own food, okay? So what happens here is they plant millet, corn, and they grow food to feed their families. But of course, what happens if you're growing millet and corn next door to what is one of the biggest elephant populations on the planet inside Hwange National Park? These huge herbivores do not respect boundaries. And here's an elephant bull in the green season coming straight out of Hwange National Park, and he's headed straight off to go and cause trouble. And this picture here is a picture I take of 4 big 6-ton bull elephants inside a field of millet, and you can imagine the chaos they cause there. Not only do they eat all the millet and corn in that field, but they trample it all too, and watermelons and everything. Now, if you're a subsistence farmer and these elephants flatten your field, that means your family does not eat that year. There is no food. The kids are going to go hungry. Instead of eating 2 or 3 meals a day, you're going to be down to 1 meal every second day or something like that. The second thing that happens is people in Southern Africa, particularly in Zimbabwe, they're pastoralists, and all your wealth is tied up in livestock, whether it be cattle or goats or donkeys, but that's where you keep your wealth. And very important, when grandma gets sick or something happens, that you can sell a cow, which can now help generate some revenue so that grandma can go to hospital. And here I'm going to go back to the story and the picture of those 3 young cheetahs. Now, those 3 young male cheetahs are just dispersing from their mothers. And what's happening, they're not very good hunters and they're a little bit lazy. And these are the 3 of them now, and they're actually inside the communal land. They've left the park. And there is no wildlife in the communal land. They're up to no good. When they're up to no good, this is what happens, okay? And this is a villager's calf, okay? And these calves are very, very valuable. This is money for those villagers. And every time they lose one of those animals, that's one of the consequences they have to pay for living next door to paradise. And of course, when you want to, this is a photograph of a typical family living next door to paradise. You can see clearly malnourished, clearly hungry, poverty-stricken people. And you've got hungry, poverty-stricken people living next door to a lot of wildlife and animals like these wildebeest. That too is also going to end up in trouble. And here's a photo of some drying elephant meat from a poacher's camp inside the park. And this is the kind of thing that would happen. You know, when your kids are hungry and your kids are starving, a lot of people end up just going into the park and poaching. And I'm not sure that I wouldn't do the same thing if my kids were kind of hungry. So it's very, very hard to say that any one of us wouldn't do the same kind of thing in their shoes. And of course, this harks back to a picture from the bad old days. It's one of my anti-poaching patrols about 10, 15 years ago. And what's happened here is a lot of wire has been stolen from one of the veterinary fences. The poachers have made wire snares. These are kind of lassos that they put on game trails, and wildlife that walks down the game trails is caught in the wire snares. And of course, now we've got a dead buffalo and a great big problem arising. Now, those wire snares are very unspecific in who they're going to kill. They don't just kill buffalo or kudu, but even cut off the trunks of our beloved elephant. And you can imagine an elephant with a short trunk, how difficult life is for that elephant. And this picture here harks back to what we inherited as a legacy of our colonial past, you know, is national parks throughout Africa, not just in Zimbabwe, were protected places full of animals and wildlife that were there for the benefit of the tourists that came from overseas. And the people who lived around the outside spent their lives poaching. So we had animals leaving the park, going and raiding crops, raiding livestock, and then we had people coming from outside the park going in and poaching. So we ended up with this militarization of our park boundaries. And I always call it a low-intensity guerrilla warfare. That was what we all were involved in the 1980s and 1990s along the Hwange National Park boundaries. That's a picture of National Geographic took in circa 1990 or 1992. Okay, so here we have a map of Hwange National Park, and I'm particularly interested in the southern boundary. The southern boundary borders onto the Chihuahua communal land, And this, I believe, is one of the largest interfaces of both wildlife inside the park and people outside the park. Certainly on the Hwange National Park boundary, and perhaps even on the whole Khaza boundary. Largest, very, very large dry season elephant densities, plus also very, very large human populations. And of course, we're sick and tired of fighting this low-intensity guerrilla warfare that we were fighting during the 70s and 80s and 90s. So what we decided to do is we were going to try and do things differently. We're going to change things. We're going to reinvent this paradigm. We're going to bring tourism out of the park and put tourism amongst the communities. Now, to start off, the first thing you need is you obviously need a patch of real estate that's going to have tourism potential. And the Camel Plains, obviously, clearly a very, very good example of that. These wide open, beautiful savannas that have wildlife and certainly are a picturesque paradise for tourism to come to. We're on the very, very edge of Hwange National Park. One of the first things we chose, we said, okay, we chose a spot to build a camp. And that's that huge camel thorn tree on the community land, which you saw a picture of earlier. This was the day we first chose our spot for a lodge. When we started talking to communities, a lot of them were not very interested at all in bringing tourism onto their land. They'd been bullied and harassed and criminalized because they lived next to Hwange National Park, and they really weren't very interested in it. And that picture there I love. That's my partner. That's Imvelo Zondo. He and I have been partners since the 1990s. And I'm an ex-game ranger, but he's a social scientist. Imvelo's great skill is in talking to people and talking to communities and explaining difficult concepts to them. And this was why Bamani was really important to us. And that's a picture taken in the dining room of Bamani Lodge, okay, right on the edge of the park, right bordering onto the communal lands, in the very periphery of where most tourism was. We could start bringing people from the communities into the lodge and start showing them what was tourism. You can imagine the people that lived in the villages had never been involved in tourism, they'd never seen it. In fact, they'd been completely disenfranchised from it through the colonial era. So here was a great opportunity to show them what tourism was. This is a tourism lodge. This is what we envision. This is what we want to do on your land, guys. And that led to some of these meetings here. And in that picture there, there's a good 5 or 6 of the people that were at the very, very beginning of the tourism program in Chilocho and in this district. And there's Headman Johnson, Nobe, Tenjwa Moyo, headmaster still today at Ngamo Primary School, Aaron Yoni, the councillor from Ward 3, and Baba Mlevu, who's a direct descendant of the Kumalo family, and he's our sub-chief based at Mlevu village. And he was the guy who first sat down and said, all right, let's give this tourism a chance. Let's give these guys some land on our land, and let's set something aside to start a tourism opportunity here. And from that, Chief Marapula had said to us that he didn't want a tented camp. He wanted a permanent lodge. He wanted something that will be here for our children's children. And we started to build Camel Thorn Lodge. And Camel Thorn, just the same way as we built Gorge's Lodge 10, 15 years previously, we built it out of stone and thatch. And I keep this picture a lot because this was a picture I took one day when I'd gone out to go and pay staff. And we had 83 young men and women working here that day because I knew we were paying them. And 63 of them were working for the first time in their lives. This is, you can imagine young fathers and young mothers getting paid cash money and taking that home to their families for the first time in their lives. You can imagine the effect that started right from day one when we started changing people's lives in those communities. And this was the development of that lodge. Here the thatch is going on underneath that camel thorn tree we saw earlier. And this is how this thing is built up. Today we built it up to this huge program that has invested millions of dollars into social services into these communities. And it all starts from building a lodge on community land. Just something different and something we're very, very proud of. I've often had people saying, well, I don't want to come to your lodge because you're not inside the park. And I say, well, that's exactly the point. We are outside the park because we chose to be there. We chose to be there for the very, very best reasons, to help conservation, to help community, and help these people who have been disenfranchised by the colonial era. Exciting program that we've got developing now too is the communities have taken it one step further. They've decided to set up wildlife sanctuaries on their own land bordering the national park. So what their vision is, and the vision that we bought into with them, is that one day not only will visitors come to the area and pay to go into Hwange National Park, but they'll also pay to come into their own private wildlife sanctuaries. And that money straight away can be started to be used for social development and improving people's lives. And this is the formation of our Cobra's Wildlife Protection Unit. And these are the young recruits here training. They're not ex-soldiers, they're not ex-game rangers, they're not ex-policemen. These are young men we've taken out of the villages and we're training to be able to look after their own wildlife resources on their own land. One of my other favorite programs is our school lunch program. All started because we started taking people to visit the schools and communities in our area. And the philanthropy that has devolved from our guests is overwhelming. In 2016, we served over 412,000 school lunches to nearly 2,700 kids. Last year, during the drought of 2019, we surpassed even that and served over 500,000 school lunches to more than 2,700 kids in 13 different schools. I'm really, really proud of what we've achieved here. A lot of people talk about helping schools and helping feed kids, but very few people do it on the scale that we do. And this is all with the help of our guests and help with all of our donors, and we thank them all. And of course, water. Matabeleland North, the province in which we live, is dry. Most of the water comes from underground water, and no community can be healthy without clean well water. And we've already drilled over 80 new wells and equipped them with pumps to pump water to the surface. And this particular well, I love the picture of it because we put the well there to help the clinic. That's the Pepper Clinic in the background there. But the well not only helps the clinic, but also helps these young girls from the Pepper High School and local moms and their families. And their families are now drinking clean, healthy water. And of course, the community's health improves accordingly. And this picture here is a picture from the old days as well. One of the heroes of Zimbabwean society, that lady teacher there. We're trying to teach all these kids in a crowded classroom block. We've got over 40 kids. You can see them sitting on the floor. They're sharing benches, trying to get educated here. And you can imagine the struggle to educate kids in an environment like this. But we've taken it one step further. We said, okay, we need to improve the situation. And using our own resources, using philanthropy from our guests, we've built 13 new classroom blocks down there. Okay, now not only are we just painting classroom blocks, but we've actually built the whole infrastructure. And this particular day, I love this picture because these are all kids in a new classroom. You can imagine this is a place where young kids can start their education and got a fighting chance to maybe pass some exams one day. And this picture I love too. This is a picture of one of those heroes of our Zimbabwean education system. We have one of the highest literacy rates in Africa, and it's thanks to our teachers. And that lady teacher there, she was living in that hut on the right-hand side, with 4 lady teachers living inside that hut down at Mchayeli. And on the left there is the new teacher's cottage. We built that lady teacher, and there she's just about to move into her new cottage, and she had tears running down her cheeks. But what I love about that image is you can see what the local community did. They carved that elephant into the thatch on that new cottage, because suddenly there's this very, very strong linkage between benefits and living next door to paradise, living next door to elephants, and suddenly we've got benefits devolving directly to them. Huge paradigm change from our old colonial past. One of my other favorite programs that we run is our Hwange School Books project, started by Lindsay, Norman, Isabel Lynch from Bomani. They've already done nearly 32,000 books have been distributed into the communities and the schools around our lodges. That's 32,000 books. Now, these are not just hand-me-down books that come from America or from overseas, but these are not only curriculum school books for the classes, but also contextual reading books that are set, stories told and illustrated within the villages where they live that kids can read and relate to, and it can help improve literacy and give them a fighting chance. And that image on the right, I love. You can imagine an older sibling reading to his kid brother and teaching him how to read. What a wonderful program this is. One of my other favorite programs that started at our lodges had some visiting dentist, Diego Romero. There he is on the left, and he every year now, he brings 18 Spanish and Italian doctors who come and do a free smile, and they do free care for all the people that live around Hwange National Park all the way up to Victoria Falls. And in its 9th year last year in 2019, we saw we saw nearly our 27,000th patient. Okay, we've seen a total of 26,453 patients since 2011. in 9 years of operations. My best estimate is probably around 70 or 80,000 free procedures we provided to the poor people who live around Hwange National Park and Victoria Falls, not only to their mouths, but for their eyes as well. And that's a great picture there, because that's about what the next level is. Not only are we taking care of problems, we're getting involved in preventative care. And here's happy school kids with their toothbrushes and Colgate, and they're taking care of their teeth now, and hopefully going to grow up with less problems. And there's one of our guides, Petele, who's a grandson of that gentleman I introduced you to earlier, Baba Mlevu, and he's involved in our program now, and what a proud young Zimbabwean he is. And it's not only about teeth, it's about eyesight. I'm an older guy as well, and I need a pair of spectacles to read. Can you imagine being so poor that you can't afford a pair of spectacles to read? And it's just life-changing when we start handing out spectacles to these people, both young and old, and suddenly they can read again and they can see, and they're not tripping over their own feet. And this brings me to where we are. You know, we've got three kind of elements here. We've got wildlife, and we've got tourists, and we've got communities. And what's absolutely wonderful is when you finally tie them all together. And in Zimbabwe, during our hard times, we had wildlife and communities, but we didn't have tourists, we didn't have visitors. So we didn't have an engine to drive our ecotourism model. But now with tourism improving and more people coming, not just staying inside the parks, not just staying in the hotels in Victoria Falls, but coming out of the parks and coming and visiting our communities, we've got things driving forward. And I really am excited about this being a sustainable ecotourism model that involves wildlife, communities, and tourism. Thanks very much.